Hey guys, so I wanted to come on here real quickly as I adjust my seat, try to get in the center here. But yeah, before I start, I'd like to ask you to do me a favor and like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe, and share the video, and click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as to support me outside of YouTube as well. There's various links you can click on to find my content elsewhere, so, as well as ways to support me as well. You can also support me during this video premiere by chiming in on the live chat, saying hi, giving your thoughts on what I have to say, as well as even donating through Super Chats if you would like to, and the comments will be on both during the video premiere and afterwards. And if you want to donate after the video premiere, if you don't get here in time, then the super thanks, the little heart with the dollar sign in the middle, will be open for you to do so. But with that said, let's get into this little question. Now, we know how people like JD from NY206 of Off the Script, Jason Solomon, just Alex, many others have been kind of very vocal about AEW over the past year or so. And basically, once in a while they will give praise to AEW doing something decent, if not very good. And one thing that it seems like, they are basically unanimously in agreement of is that when it comes to the WarGames concept, they do agree that it seems that, outlets, promotions like AEW do it a lot better than WWE. Like, they understand the concept of what the WarGames distinction is about. That basically it's a group of 4, 5, maybe 6, in the case of the women last night, going to war against each other and basically doing whatever it takes to win. Now, when it comes to AEW, though, people might say that, well, the way they go and do war games, it's basically they should just add another word to that, and that's extreme war games. But that's not necessary because it's called Blood and Guts. And Blood and Guts, again, being their war games, is essentially just a way of saying it's war games, but taken up, by 100 maybe, when it comes to the violence. And, they're not the only ones that do that. I mean, we know MLW does it with the one ring war chamber, if you will. They used to do 2 rings back in the early days when they started in the early to mid 2000s, but they've reduced it now to just like 1 ring. From what I've seen, they might occasionally do the 2 rings. From what I understand, occasionally they will do that. But MLW mostly has been like, basically contained in 1 ring, and all that. Just like TNA would do with Lethal Lockdown. It's just 1 ring, surrounded by a cage. And that's their interpretation of war games. So that's their take on the war games concept, because it's still the same rules and all that, except, the difference with some of them is, like with Lethal Lockdown and TNA, the only way the roof of the cage comes down is when all the participants are in there, and that's when the roof of the cage with the weapons hanging from it, is lowered, and then that's how Lethal Lockdown begins, and then, basically now you have the opportunity to try to win the match for your team. And, the same goes for MLW, except MLW doesn't, do that or anything. They just say, hey, let's add the weapons into the cage or on the side of the cage and all that, and then they just proceed, I should say, not preside, but proceed to go from there, and not, really activate the war games rules of submit or pin or submit or, or survive or whatever, until all the participants are in there. So everybody has their own and different interpretations of it, if you will, when it comes to how people perceive war games, and how it, should be shown to the world, shown to the fan base. But when it comes to WWE, yeah, it does get violent. The war games match can be violent, there's no doubt. But a lot of people feel like, Triple H and Nick Khan are playing it too safe. Like, this is war games. You're supposed to, take it up a notch. You're supposed to have a little bit of color in there, blood, if you will, and stuff like that. You're supposed to, at times, if needed, use weaponry, of the extreme kind, maybe like kendo sticks or maybe barbed wire on occasions and stuff like that. But a lot of people feel that what Triple H is doing is not risking not risking, that chance with some of the superstars involved, because a lot of the stars that get involved are big time names. And when you're a conglomeration like WWE, you don't want to risk any of your top names that are in there, to injury. Yeah, they'll get hurt. Yeah, they might get cut up, maybe busted open. But, you don't want to risk any more injury outside of that. So, you want to play it a little safe. You want to play it a little carefully. But I also think the reason Triple H does it is he's paying homage to the old school way of WarGames, the old school way of WarGames, to where basically for a majority of the match, roof or not, and in this case it's not, because they feel that gives more space to the competitors to do some spectacular off-the-cage moves, that, basically, outside of that, what he's doing is he's paying homage to it, because to someone like, to someone that's an old school soul like Triple H, if you're going to get color and everything, you're going to get color and all that in WarGames, then you need to do it the old-fashioned way. You need to basically do it in the cage. You need to use the cage, if you will, as a weapon to do so. And one could understand that that's why he, as some people would say, is playing it safe when it comes to the WarGames concept. That one, he's paying homage to the original WarGames with his own little twist with a roofless cage. But he's also basically not just paying homage, with his own twist of the roofless cage, but he's also basically sending a message of, yeah, you can bring weapons in, but I'd rather have it be more old school, more, hey, let's have the color get done in the cage with the use of the cage and stuff like that. And let's not forget, when WCW would do WarGames later on, they were violent. Yeah, like when WarGames first began, they were violent. The matches were violent, there's no doubt. But I think later on, even before Hogan got in there, I think 3 years before Hogan got in there, they started to lessen the violence of the WarGames. And I don't know if that was because the network, TBS, they were on at that time, or TNT or Turner themselves were like, hey, let's tone down the violence, or it was whoever was in charge, Jim Herd or whoever. But, they did tone it down. And even when Hogan got in there, yeah, the matches were violent, but they weren't like the violence you would hope for. They were kind of like kiddified, if you will. Even with the NWO, when they did the NWO thing, they were still very light on the violence. So, so no matter how you look at WarGames, and how it should be presented and all that, I mean, yes, having color and everything does show the ramifications of the match. But when you really think about it, you don't really need color that much in a match like this. Especially on a big, especially with a big time promotion like WWE, you just need enough of a presentation to get across, to get across the message that what you're seeing here is an all-out war. That a lot of things are going to get settled in this matchup one way or another, between the participants. And that also, from a storyline perspective, you don't know if said participants will be able to get along with each other or trust each other. And that's the main concept there. But when you look at AEW, they call it blood and guts, and they live up to it. Some might say they might be in a little bit of trouble potentially with TBS after going so far as they did last night. But we haven't seen them get in trouble before, so I don't think it'll be this. I don't think that'll be the case here. But you never know, especially with the changing of the guard coming down the line for WBD. But really, I just wanted to come on here and explain, in my opinion, my thoughts on the differences and why, WarGames is done, in a different way here and there between promotions and so on. But